Michelle Wiese, Bockmann, Principal Analyst at Lloyd's List Intelligence. Michelle, I wanted to get your thoughts on, I mean, we're dealing with OPEC Plus there, with Ali, and the idea that they may or may not add new supply for the second half of the year. The other part of this equation, of course, is Russia's crude oil exports continue to get to the market. Tankers seem to be still defying regulators. Is there anything on your horizon that says that there might be that finally the sanctions might curtail the Russians' exports? Because there has been some moves to make it more difficult for shippers.
Good morning, Sean. From where I stand right now, I think there's a lot of energy and a lot of hot air, but very little substantive action. Shipping continues to get out of Russia. About half of it is on what we call a dark or parallel fleet of tankers that operate outside Western regulation. That was for the full month looking at April. And those tankers are going further outside regulators. I'm looking at some that have gone and reflagged to Eswatini, which is a false flag. And there's all sorts of shenanigans happening in order to keep Russian, Iranian, and also Venezuelan oil flowing. And I think regulators are weighing up what to do, but at this stage, they haven't really wielded a big stick. And I think, once again, they don't want to cause a price shock in an election year for the US.
How does a ship with a false flag dock at a port or get insurance?
That's a very good question. The tankers that I'm looking at are in international waters and taking on ship-to-ship transfers, so that operate outside Western jurisdiction. We're watching them very, very closely. There are 5 at the moment. They have been operating in Russian trade. They were US sanctioned, but still they're sailing, and also they're engaging in deceptive shipping practices like spoofing their location. One we've been watching that recently picked up a cargo of Iranian oil. It's now in Anchorage off Corfu, for example. I mean, I watch this every day, and the levels that traders are going to make sure that oil continues flowing is quite extraordinary from a regulatory perspective.
Michelle, just picking up on that, one of the things that came out of the events in April when Iran and Israel were facing off and we were kind of on a cliff edge was the backside of that was increased rhetoric around the possibility that the US would start to tighten its existing sanctions on Iran, which it had kind of been turning a blind eye to in terms of Iran's oil exports, which of course sort of basically came back to as much as they can every last year. Are you seeing anything in the shipping that indicate that those I mean, the US also didn't renew the Venezuelan exemption after 6 months, although there seems to be a lot of fudging around that as well. But in particular to the Iran getting its oil to the market, getting its tankers to China and so forth, is there anything there to indicate that the Americans and others are tightening this grip?
Well, they're taking action. I have seen some companies sanctioned, but I haven't seen flows diminish in any respect. It's just a completely parallel market now. What I am doing is I'm looking at physical indicators within the shipping market to see whether or not those fundamentals give any guidance to oil demand in the next 3 or 4 months. And I'm looking at ton-mile demand, for example, which looks at, it's a proxy of tanker demand. It looks at distance. It looks at the volumes carried by distance traveled, and ton-mile demand for tankers was at records last quarter. It has diminished now, but we're seeing that there's still a great deal of strength in the tanker market, even though when you're looking, say, for example, at diesel demand in Europe, the futures market is in contango, which suggests that, that situation bears watching in case that is an indicator of what's going to be happening over the summer. But in terms of shipping signals on Iran, there's very little indication that any sanctions enforcement is having an indicate any real actual action on the physical shipment of that crude to China.
And given that shipping operators, I mean, there was some talk in the first quarter that the number of ships that were availing or participating in the so-called dark fleet had diminished quite dramatically over the few months of the end of last year into this year because of the threats of US sanctions. Are you saying that that now has eased off again and there's still lots of ships participating in that opportunity for the returns and the lack of consequence?
Absolutely. By my calculations and by our methodology, about 11 to 12% of the internationally trading tanker fleet is involved in those three sanctioned trades, US sanctioned trades of Venezuela, Iran, and Russia. And that 11% figure has remained, I think it's about 600 tankers now. It's grown by about 50 tankers in the last 4 or 5 months. So it's still quite a present reality that
600 tankers participating in what is called the dark fleet.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, it's something that I think is well known in shipping circles, but not so much outside in oil trading circles. I think on the physical side, there are a lot of traders who spend enormous amounts of money on compliance to make sure that they don't inadvertently undergo a ship-to-ship transfer with a tanker that has been engaged in these trades or perhaps has connections to the sanctioned entities. But it's a real and growing phenomena that everybody is worrying about at the moment. Those numbers are quite confronting.
I wanted to get your thoughts today, sort of a run around the world, so to speak, on the choke points. Were a big part of the narrative in the first quarter, both particularly the Red Sea, but also the Panama Canal was suffering from drought. We had threats to the export channels out of Russia and the Baltics area, and we also have increasing noise and stress around the South China Sea and the Straits of Malacca. So I wanted to get around the world sort of view there on what those choke points look like at the moment and their outlook.
Certainly. So with the Red Sea, we're looking at traffic down about 60%. And I think for the week and about a week ago, Suez Canal transits were at the lowest level since the Houthi trouble began. So 60% down with the Red Sea. Tankers are still rerouting around there. I think with the Danish Straits, there's been, again, a lot of hot air, but those vessels, those tankers have what we call in maritime conventions, the right of innocent passage. So there will be no interruptions there. Strait of Hormuz, I know we've talked about once again. I think the possibility that the threats of closure are remote. And when it comes to other areas, I believe that barring any unforeseen geopolitical events or economic shocks, well, everything is fine. Panama Canal is down about 20%. We've actually seen transits increase. So on a choke point level, fingers crossed so far, it's just steady as she goes. No big changes expected, barring, of course, with the Red Sea. If there's some sort of resolution in Gaza, then I think transits will resume through the Suez Canal.